Imagine being locked in a cell with no way out. The walls are thick, the locks are secure, and the guards are merciless. For most, escape would be a fantasy. But for Yoshie Shiratori, escape was a necessity. Known as Japan's most legendary escape artist, Yoshie defied every odd, escaping from prison not once, not twice, but 4 times. His daring escapes were a mix of brilliance, determination, and a relentless fight against injustice. How did he do it? How can someone escape from 4 different prisons? Let's dive into the remarkable true story of a man who simply refused to be caged. Yoshie Shiratori was born in 1907 in Aomori Prefecture, Japan. Life in rural Japan during this period was difficult, especially for those without wealth or status. From fishing to factory work, he did whatever he could to survive. But life wasn't kind to Yoshie, and his early experiences were marked by hardship and loss. It was in this context that Yoshie's story began to unfold. In 1933, Yoshie's life took a dramatic turn. He was accused of theft, and even worse, murder. The justice system of the time was brutal, archaic, and heavily biased against the accused, especially those without resources or social connections. Trials were often rushed, with flimsy evidence and coerced confessions used to secure convictions. Despite his protests of innocence, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. His cries for justice fell on deaf ears, and he was transferred to Aomori Prison, a notorious facility located in the rugged, isolated northern reaches of Japan. Aomori Prison was unlike any prison Yoshie had ever imagined. It was designed to break men. The walls were thick, the cells were cramped, and the food was sparse. The winters were bone-chilling, with temperatures regularly dropping below freezing. Guards were known for their cruelty, and inmates were subject to constant surveillance and harsh treatment. For Yoshie, this environment was a new kind of challenge. But instead of succumbing to fear and hopelessness, he began observing his surroundings, looking for weaknesses in the system. While inspecting the few items in his cell, Yoshie discovered a hidden treasure. A thin metal wire wrapped around the handle of the wash bucket provided for bathing. It seemed insignificant, but in Yoshie's hands it became a tool of liberation. Every night, when the prison grew quiet and the guard's footsteps faded, he worked carefully, picking the lock on his cell door. The process was slow and required extreme patience. Any mistake could cost him everything, but unlocking his cell was only part of the challenge. Above him was a cracked skylight, his only chance of escaping the prison walls. Yoshie knew it would take more than just determination to pull off his plan. He needed time to make his move. On the night of his escape, he devised a clever ruse. He placed wooden floorboards onto his futon, arranging them to resemble a sleeping body. When the guards patrolled the corridor, they glanced inside his cell and saw what they thought was a prisoner deep in slumber. Unbeknownst to them, Yoshie was already climbing toward the skylight. The skylight, though cracked, was still a challenge to navigate. Carefully, Yoshie squeezed through, emerging onto the roof of the prison. From there, he descended into the darkness and disappeared into the night. By the time the guards realized he was gone, it was too late. Yoshie Shiratori had vanished, leaving no trace behind. For 3 days, he managed to evade the guards, blending into the countryside and living off whatever food he could forage. But eventually, exhaustion caught up with him. He was recaptured, brought back to Aomori Prison, and subjected to even harsher conditions as punishment for his first escape attempt. However, this failure only intensified Yoshie's resolve. He spent time reflecting on what could have gone wrong and started to refine his methods. His next prison transfer would be to Akita Prison, a facility infamous for its stricter security protocols and harsh environment. This prison was located deeper inland, and the guards here were less forgiving. But Yoshie was undeterred. As soon as he arrived, he began observing patterns in guard movements, security routines, and the prison's infrastructure. During his time at Akita Prison, Yoshie noticed something strange about the wooden ceiling above his cell. It seemed weaker than the walls, perhaps due to moisture or age. Inspired by this observation, he began planning his escape. Using a makeshift tool fashioned from the metal handle of a bath bucket, he began chipping away at the wood every night, taking meticulous care not to draw attention. It took weeks of careful work, but eventually, he managed to create an opening large enough to crawl through. On a cold, moonless night, Yoshie took his chance. He climbed through the hole in the ceiling, slipped down to the prison's ground floor, and disappeared into the darkness. This time, he was more cautious. He avoided populated areas and moved only under the cover of darkness, using shadows and natural terrain to conceal his movements. He survived by foraging for food and drinking from streams. It was a desperate existence, but it worked. For several weeks, Yoshie managed to elude capture and navigate the wilderness around Akita. But Yoshie was hanging on the edge of survival and running out of options. He made a terrible choice and decided to visit a guard from his previous time spent inside. On June 14, 1942, a guard by the name of Kobayashi had an unusual visitor at his front door, the infamous escape king, Yoshie Shiratori. When he was in the bathroom, the guard contacted the authorities, betrayed him, and once more, he was recaptured and sent to an even more secure prison, this time to Abashiri Prison, located deep in the frozen north of Hokkaido. Abashiri Prison was considered escape-proof. It was situated amidst barren tundra, surrounded by ice and snow, and designed to withstand anything. Guards were equipped with high-powered rifles, and every aspect of the prison was intended to deter escape attempts. But Yoshie's history as an escape artist suggested that this place might not be as secure as it seemed. He spent months observing the guards' routines, monitoring their patrols, and studying the prison's design. One of the most important observations Yoshie made was about the prison's shackles. They were extremely heavy and difficult to remove, designed to hold even the most determined inmate. But Yoshie was nothing if not determined. In a bold move, he dislocated his own shoulders to break free of the restraints. The pain was excruciating, but it worked. He then used the narrow food slot in his cell, which was barely large enough to pass a tray of food, as an escape route. Using it, he squeezed his body through and emerged into the freezing cold of Hokkaido. The harsh conditions of Hokkaido posed a new set of challenges, but Yoshie was resourceful. He moved silently, stayed low to the ground, and hid among snowdrifts to avoid detection. He relied on his survival skills, hunting, foraging, and staying warm through primitive methods, to navigate this frozen wilderness. Yoshie went undetected for around 2 years, living in an abandoned mine in the mountains. Japan was at war during this time, and the blackouts were perfect cover for him to stay invisible. Until one day he was caught by a farmer stealing tomatoes on a farm and was attacked. The farmer was tragically killed from a stab wound at the hands of a desperate Yoshie, although it was later said that it was in self-defense. Despite his history of daring escapes, Yoshie Shiratori found himself facing the ultimate sentence: death. In 1947, the Sapporo District Court condemned him for the murder of the farmer, and he was sent to the Sapporo prison. This time, the guards were confident, as every time he had escaped in the past, it had been through climbing, squeezing through a gap, or getting out of his restraints. This time, all 3 bases were covered. Unfortunately for Yoshie, his new cell was specially crafted to keep him in. The windows were too small for even his head to fit through, and the ceilings were too high for any hope of climbing. Believing escape was impossible, the guards grew overconfident. They didn't handcuff him. Why bother? Shiratori had made a name for himself as a ceiling escape artist, and the guards were sure they'd accounted for that. But they overlooked one critical detail: the floor. With nothing but a few miso soup bowls, Shiratori began his work. Night after night, he chipped away at the floor, carefully hollowing out a tunnel. He hid the dirt in a small pocket beneath the floorboards, ensuring the guards would never notice. Slowly, methodically, he dug his way to freedom. In 1947, against all odds, Yoshie Shiratori escaped Sapporo prison. It was his 4th and final escape, cementing his place as Japan's most legendary escape artist. But freedom didn't come easily. For days, Shiratori wandered, homeless and hungry. Eventually, he sat on a park bench where a police officer happened to join him. Seeing Shiratori's tired and disheveled state, the officer offered him a cigarette. Yoshie was surprised, as this was one of the only nice gestures he'd had in years. It was in that moment, after lighting the cigarette, that Shiratori confessed his identity. Exhausted from running and yearning for an end to his ordeal, he told the officer who he was. Rather than facing immediate punishment, Shiratori was treated with surprising leniency. When he returned to court, the judges took a more compassionate view of his actions, considering the harsh conditions and injustices he had endured. His death sentence was overturned, and Yoshie Shiratori was eventually granted his freedom. It was proven that he was originally sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit, but then broke the law by breaking out. Do you think he deserved to go free? Let us know below. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you all for watching.